Today we are going to talk about what Palmer Luckey did after he sold his startup Oculus to Facebook, which is now known as Meta. Palmer Luckey was the man who made the Oculus Rift, one of the most popular VR headsets in the world. He started out as a gamer/anime fan who decided to make a VR headset similar to the Nerve gear seen in Sword Art Online in his garage for Doom 3. Palmer Luckey showed off his VR headset at the E3 Expo of 2012 to much fanfare. Eventually, Palmer finessed his passion into a VR startup. At his peak, Palmer Luckey sold his VR company Oculus to Facebook for $2 billion way back in 2014. Before we talk about what happened to Palmer Luckey after he left Facebook, let us take a look at the reasons why Facebook fired him. In 2017, Palmer Luckey was fired because of his political views. He paid $10,000 to a pro-Trump group called the Nimble America organization, who Palmer Luckey naively believed had fresh ideas on how to communicate with young voters through the use of billboards. He was naive because the Nimble America organization decided to communicate with young voters by putting up shitposts and memes attacking Hilary Clinton, a likely candidate for US presidency at the time. Many supporters of Hilary Clinton, which was a lot, several millions of Americans, cried when they saw the billboard of Hilary Clinton plastered with the words "too big to jail." It got worse when people found out Palmer Luckey had a Reddit username called Nimble Richmond. Whether Palmer Luckey was the Redditor Nimble Richmond was never proven. Palmer allegedly used his account to say stuff like, "We know Hillary Clinton is a corrupt official, a warmonger, a freedom stripper, not the good kind, the bad kind, that strips freedoms from its citizens and grants it to her donors." Political views can be polarizing at times, especially back then when it was extremely popular to hate on Trump. So any support anyone gave to Trump, even if indirectly, like how Palmer Luckey did by insulting Hillary Clinton, would turn them against you. Facebook, Palmer's employer, turned on him when they found out about his pro-Trump stance. Facebook was a giant company. Any negative PR was bad PR. Palmer was forced to apologize for his pro-Trump donation. Facebook forced him to tell everyone he supported someone else. Palmer Luckey told everyone he supported Ron Paul and Gary Johnson and decided to reluctantly vote for Gary Johnson in his election. Palmer Luckey didn't like it, but he did it anyway. Apparently, that was not enough for Facebook. They sought to cut all ties with Palmer Luckey by firing him. It was illegal in California to fire an employee for his political views, so Facebook said he was fired for other reasons. The firing could be because of the ZeniMax controversy, where Facebook was forced to pay millions in a private settlement because there were accusations that the Oculus VR headset was made using code stolen from ZeniMax. That was the second theory for his firing. However, Palmer Luckey later said in several podcasts that Facebook fired him because of his political views and claimed Facebook was lying when they said they didn't fire him because of political views. Palmer alleges there was no way Facebook as a company could say they fired an employee for political views, so Facebook had to pretend it wasn't the case. Palmer Luckey doesn't blame Facebook for doing what they did. He chose to sue them instead for $100 million, which was part of $600 million Facebook was supposed to pay him in total. Facebook was supposed to pay him the money over time with the condition that he remained at the company for a couple of years, which Palmer can't do because he's fired. There was $100 million which was owed to Palmer if he had stayed at Facebook for the next few years. Palmer's lawyer managed to get him the money in the end. Palmer Luckey used the money to co-found Anduril Industries. The company name traces its origins to the Lord of the Rings. Anduril, also known as Flame of the West in Quenya, was a sword reforged from the shards of Narsil at the end of the Third Age in Rivendell for Aragorn, the heir of Isildur. On the sword, Anduril, was the inscription, "I am Anduril, who was Narsil, the sword of Elendil. Let the trolls of Mordor flee me." If you're confused about what I just said, just know Palmer Luckey's new startup named Anduril has the same name as a sword from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. They named the drone startup after a sword in the Lord of the Rings trilogy because, well, they're both weapons. Moving on, Anduril Industries is a drone startup created to cater to the US military. Palmer Luckey won his first military contract using a drone his startup built from scratch. The drone crash into other drones to destroy them, passing the tests held by the US military, while the other drones made by the old defense contractors failed. The large defense contractors actually complained that it was unfair that an outside party was able to make a working drone using their own money. The US military should give them the money through contracts first if they want a working prototype, they argued. This was a silly argument, and Palmer Luckey kept his military contract.
Yeah, I mean, we recently just won $1 billion contract with SOCOM, Special Operations Command. to do all of their counter drone work. So basically protecting, like building the hardware and software that is defending them from drones that are attacking their installations and positions. And we started working on our counter drone system using all of our own money years and years ago before we had any customer. We started building the hardware and the software, building our interceptors, building our jammers. And then it was after we invested a ton of our own money and proved that this was the right way to solve the problem that we were able to go. And actually there was a full competition for who they were gonna select for this. And they did basically a shoot off between all these different companies. And some of the companies that we beat were actually getting paid by the government to develop their systems using government money, but we had invested quite a bit more money and moved much faster. And there were literally contractors that were complaining saying, this isn't fair. We have to compete with Anduril and they've been investing their own money for years. How could we possibly be expected to compete when the government's only given us, tens of millions of dollars over the course of the last 2 years? And I'm like, guys, of course this is how it works. Like, you could have won if you had spent your own money. If you had spent your own money for 5 years, you probably would be able to compete with us on an even playing field. But you can't take no risk and expect all of the reward. And we spent a lot less than these companies developing much better capabilities because we had the right incentives. When we started the company, we basically threw out the rule book on how defense procurement is normally done. It's normally very much focused on cost plus contracting, where a company gets paid for time and materials, like a fixed cost, and then a fixed profit margin on top of that. The problem is that incentivizes companies to spend as long as they can doing something. Don't rely on money from congressmen to get the thing built. Use your own money.
This is rational and rare and risk-seeking because if I may, it's sort of like the big old contractors are basically saying, we will bid in the hopes of building.
Yep.
Whereas you guys are saying, we will build in the hope that the government, our customer, DoD, is going to buy.
I want to set up a company so that when we fail to make a product that works, we don't get paid. That seems obvious, but it is not the way that it works in the defense space.
Initially, Palmer Luckey came under fire for making weapons of mass destruction. Drones historically have been used to kill and destroy, and getting a US military contract was, well, not a good look after Palmer's pro-Trump stance. Many of his Silicon Valley friends bailed on him, only to come back after people found out several of Anduril's latest Alto 600M drones were part of the $2 billion aid package which the US government sent to Ukraine so they could fight against the Russian invasion. Using Anduril's drones, Ukrainian military was able to launch a scouting drone from a moving helicopter. This was a concept from the US Army which has been extensively tested through Palmer Luckey's company. The drone can carry communication relays, 3-kilogram warheads, and electronic warfare tools. All the helicopter pilot has to do is to tell the drone what to look for, and if it finds something, the drone will give the pilot an alert. One button push is all that's needed to tell the drone to destroy the target. The pilot doesn't even have to control the drone remotely. The Russian army jams communications so autonomous systems can't operate closely to the stuff they don't want destroyed. The Russians changed their tactics and systems several times. To counteract this, Anduril engineers receive intel from Ukrainian intelligence and pushes software updates to the drone to modify its capabilities on the fly, or perhaps they change the way it communicates so the drone continues to work while the Russians are trying to jam the signals. Anduril has raised over $1.8 billion, raising the company valuation to $8 billion. Venture funds are extremely optimistic about Palmer Luckey's startup thanks to the various billion-dollar contracts Anduril won from the US military. Anduril has a $99 million contract from the Department of Defense's Drone Innovation Unit. Anduril also won a $1 billion contract to act as a systems integrator on a counter-drone project backed by the US Special Operations Command. Palmer Luckey owns roughly 11% of Anduril. Anduril's military contracts with the US Army should have been impossible. Traditionally, US defense has had a hard time handing out contracts to Silicon Valley startups. It takes almost 2 years to get a contract from the US military. By then, the startup will have moved on. The US defense also tends to favor older, larger defense contractors with a track record. That's where most of the money from the US military ends up. What Palmer Luckey has managed to do was break a long-held view that Silicon Valley startups and the US military aren't compatible. Anduril has a whole suite of drones and other defense equipment in the works. Palmer Luckey is living his best life, inspecting drones while navigating Anduril HQ on his Segway. I hope you liked the video, leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you haven't already. It's much appreciated.